a handshake between him and the former prime minister. The ultimate putting together of the committee and the ultimate report is his constitutional response and legal responsibility, both in terms of the product that comes out of it and how to guide it going forward. When you look at that 9-point agenda that I just replayed for our viewers, did you get the feeling that some of the recommendations of the report will be able to adequately address issues like ethnic antagonism, inclusivity, the challenges that have bedeviled devolution, for example? First of all, let me start by saying that I was among the people who are very skeptical about this report because and then I'll ask you if that has changed, but you carry on. That's because then for me to talk about the expectations, I have to say my background. I was very skeptical about this report because in the inception, we were told it's going to be a tsunami that's going to sweep everybody. We were also told that it's going to have political ramifications, and the victim of that political ramifications will be the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya and so forth. Today, I have come consciously, after looking at the report and listening to the President when he spoke, that the President has been in full control of this process. So you've seen the report? Yes, I've seen the report. But okay, Honorable Molo told me just before he hasn't seen it. You will ask him, and you'll ask me why. I have seen the report, and it's been sent to me by a member of the Secretariat. When we were in State House, the President said that it will be circulated shortly. We should leave our emails, and one of the Secretariat members sent to me, and it mirrors exactly what you have you've put public on the TV. Okay, well, coverage by political and TV. Therefore, I will now come to your question. Does it really reflect the expectations of the people of Kenya? Looking at the report, the executive summary that I have is 23 pages. The ultimate report is about 156 pages. Of course, I can't pretend to say I've read everything, but as a snapshot of it, you will see that it addresses issues of inclusivity in the country, proposes certain things like, what we need to do to our primary schools, intake in secondary schools, intake in the universities, integration of a library or history. There are a raft of proposals that deal with all these issues. So you would say yes. I will say to a great extent that it reflects what we expect as a conversation. Okay, and I want you to hold it there. And the good thing about this report is that it's not an end on itself. It just says these are the things which have been said. Now let's have a proper conversation on how to implement them. Fine. Okay, Honorable Molo, you can now come in, and I can take you back. When you look at your role as a member of the Committee of Experts, you were part of the team that drafted and delivered the 2010 Constitution, and the recommendations that have been seen today, whether you agree with them, you're still saying you haven't seen the report, could lead to a change in the Constitution. How does that make you feel when you reflect on that? Can you say that you delivered a document in form of the 2010 Constitution that did not need changes? And if changes will come, what does that say about the work that you and the team did? We could start from there, even as you give us your reflections.
Well, first of all, thanks for the invite. But to start us off, the indication I have, the lawyers usually say my instructions, and having consulted those who are at State House, is that the report was handed over to the principal architects, and that is the Prime Minister and the President, but it was only one copy, which therefore remained with the President. The indication I have also is that the report was not going to be available, whether in soft or hard copy, until tomorrow, when both will be availed. So I will not, unlike my brother, purport to talk about the contents of the report. I will treat that as speculation and hypothesis. But I'm willing to comment on any aspect of it based on my experience in the Committee of Experts and on my engagement on some of these matters. Secondly, I think that it is impressive where I think my brother Murkomen is now coming from, in two respects. One, I am happy that he attended State House, because his earlier responses, I think in the media from yesterday's engagement, suggested he wasn't going to. And a lot of his colleagues suggested they weren't going to, and most of them didn't, but he did, which is, I think, a good thing. The second good thing is the reconciliatory tone that appears to have been struck, even by the Deputy President. As you know, both the President, the Deputy President, and the Right Honourable Prime Minister spoke, and you could see that the tone that they struck even by the Deputy President, was reconciliatory and promising, and is the same tone that Senator Murkomen is striking now, which I think is very good moving forward, good for engagement. Now, one of the things that also makes me happy, and this is the third, is we've spent copious amounts of days and hours arguing on the legality of the task force. And many people saying it is unconstitutional, it is illegal. But the reality is, which Senator Murkomen has now conceded, that a task force appointed by the president cannot be unconstitutional, cannot be illegal, irrespective of what caused it. What caused it was the handshake. But in terms of the executive order that was signed, it was signed by the president, and therefore it makes sense that the president would submit it. As I understand it, and that is what both the Deputy President said, the President said, and the Right Honorable Prime Minister, that the report was to consult Kenyans widely and then come up with proposals. Now, those proposals are not the solution in itself. The proposals are for, national discourse. So that from the report, from the discourse, then we can now arrive at what the way forward, which then would be reduced into a document. And now, yes, to your question, what is my feeling about the fact that we did a constitution which now is about to be amended or has issues that require amendment? I feel pretty good about it.
You feel pretty good about it?
Yes, because at the time we wrote the constitution, it was the result of a compromise over 22 years. And that's why the document we came up with was called the Harmonized Draft Constitution. That Harmonized Draft Constitution went to members of parliament to also give their input in Naivasha. They gave their input and it came back to us. And some of the things that came back to us is not what Kenyans had proposed or what we had proposed. But we had to work with it because it was a compromise document. So this document was a compromise document. It has held this country for nearly 10 years. In the life of any constitution, 10 years is a routine and good time to re-examine it. So what works, what does not work.
The issue for some has been that this document has not been fully and properly implemented. How do you respond to those? That is also true. I mean, it's true in so many places, and I can demonstrate that to you. So why change what we have not fully implemented is what some would ask.
The fact that we are re-examining it does not mean that we are admitting that it has been fully implemented. There are parts which have not been implemented. And some of those parts are the very reason for revising and reviewing it. For example, it is now time to relook at the question of the two-thirds gender principle. We put the principle, then when the members of parliament went to Naivasha, they adjusted the numbers. The numbers and the principle were never in tandem. When it came back to us and we only had 7 days, we had two options. Either remove the principle or abolish the numbers. We couldn't abolish the numbers because the members of parliament had full consensus on it. We couldn't remove the principle because the women of this country needed that principle. So we consciously left it for a future solution. It has never come. So it is time to relook at such things.
Okay. I want to read your message here from Leader, and I'm coming to you, Honorable Murkomen. This is coming in from Honorable Eden Duale, National Assembly Majority Leader. He says, and I quote, "From the first impression of the BBI report, I have faith that we can sort all the items proposed therein through constitutional amendments by way of a parliamentary initiative as contemplated under Article 256. Even though most of us genuinely desired a parliamentary system, that has not been achieved through the BBI. I have strong faith that we can achieve all the proposals contained in the BBI report without a referendum, which will definitely be divisive with winners and losers." I know you want to respond to what he said, but can you also weigh in on what Honorable Duale has said? Go ahead.
First of all, I just want to, I have maximum respect for my senior in the legal profession, Honorable Otiendo Molo, but I don't want him to misrepresent facts. The first place, I was invited to State House in my capacity as the majority leader, just like Senator Orengo was invited as the minority leader. And at no time did I ever say that I will never attend a State House if I am invited. So that's not true. Number two, my colleagues who are not in State House were not invited. Just like Senator Honorable Otiendo Molo, they were not invited. what only really struck me a little bit, and the president said we must be very honest, and I want to be very honest today here, is that I saw the crowd was more of a Kieleweke embrace kind of a group, which was strange.
So your position there was
which was
tokenism?
Strange. No, not just tokenism, that for a process that is inclusive, you already, invite people in a very divisive manner, and people, if you look at the pictures, because you people have the pictures, you will see the likes of, Commander, Shebesh, Nyokafi, you have the likes
of... So in a nutshell, if you had a say over the guests,
I'm just saying,
yes,
exactly.
you'd have added a few
I'm just saying,
names.
if the person who was doing the invitation, because I was told someone who is a PS in OP or whatever, I don't know, if he was doing the invitation with a view of an inclusive process. So if he invited the Inua Mama, he should have invited the other one called Embrace. I hear there are one others called Kieleweke, he should have invited the Tanga Tanga and all those kind of groups. Because the president spoke very well that we must start this process by being more inclusive, being more carrying everybody together. Number two, and I'm coming to
and we know there were journalists, we know there were politicians,
yes.
Civil society, religious leaders. What other clergy, what other inclusivity would you have wanted?
I'm just saying, from the sitting of parliament, we were invited as leaders, myself, Duale, Susan Kika, Orengo, Mbadi, and Junet. But the extra members of parliament were just picked from a certain section of political group. That does not represent where we are going. And I totally agree with Atiendo Molo. I am here today speaking in this very conciliatory tone because nothing in that document will succeed, like Honorable Duale is saying, without the whole parliament sitting together. Do you know what it takes to get 2/3 of parliament to pass anything? So you can't start the process by even behaving to exclude anybody. And the president spent about 30 minutes making that case, that he would like us to look at these reports honestly, make our views about the document public and honest discourse, as long as we're not abusing each other, agree on the things that we need to take forward. And like Honorable Duale is saying, there are people, by the way, if you ask me, and many other, from a theory of constitutional law, parliamentary system could have been more easier to deal with this executive presidency and the people fighting all the time. But the reality on the ground is that many Kenyans still want to elect their president directly. And therefore, this report has kept what many Kenyans want, the common mwananchi. And Honorable Duale has conceded that even though his view was parliamentary system, he is ready to work with what the document proposes, because I have seen the document, the original document, saying that, we go for a prime minister in the, what we call the Tanzanian model, which indeed, and I want to tell the Honorable Duale if he's watching, that which indeed, if you look at the proposal, is converting his position, the position of the majority leader in the National Assembly, to be called a prime minister.
Your thoughts on the fact that he says without a referendum we can achieve those recommendations?
That is correct.
You support what
not just feels? I support, but looking at the Constitution, Article 255, 256, you do not need a referendum to achieve the proposals that are there, if all of us mobilize ourselves in both the National Assembly and the Senate and take forward the proposals in a bipartisan manner, so that then we can achieve the objectives.
Okay.
The thing, though, that I want to say, if we want to go now to the details of the discussion, is that you have a proposal of a prime minister who is exactly the position of currently Duale is holding, being converted to be called a prime minister. But the proposal says that person comes from majority party. That will not be possible. That there's an assumption there because there are two positions being created. That one, and the second presidential candidate comes to parliament and becomes the leader of opposition.
Official opposition.
So, but it is not given always that the loser in presidential elections has the minority in parliament. It could be that the opposition, like 207, has ODM in 207 was the majority. So those are some of the things that need to be changed, to be tweaked, so that it can reflect the reality on what can easily happen on the ground. But perfectly speaking, a process that will not require a referendum, costing Kenyans over 20 billion, is something is part of the reason why I am saying let's move forward.
Honorable Molo, you've been going through the 2010 Constitution quite vigorously as we had this discussion. Go ahead and share with us your thoughts.
Well, first of all, I think we remain to see how many of our brothers who are on what I think my brother has called the Tanga team will heed the call of the president for inclusivity as he did and appear tomorrow at Bomas, because the invitation has been extended to all members of parliament.
Now,
I really hope that, like my brother here, they accede to that. Because, and I've always said this, and I agree with Senator Murkomen on this, the trick is to pull together in the same direction, even if not all of us, but a significant majority of us. Mm-hmm. Now, secondly, whether we require referendum or not, and I'm going purely on the basis that we are yet to get the document, mm-hmm. will depend on one fundamental issue. If we are introducing the position of Prime Minister, you know, you can have the position of a Prime Minister, but it's modeled in a way that it is a Prime Minister in a presidential system.
It is. Yeah.
It is what we call a presidential hybrid. But you can have a Prime Minister in a parliamentary system, which still has a president, but it's a parliamentary hybrid. What we had in the harmonized draft constitution was a parliamentary hybrid. We had a president who was still directly elected. We called him the state president. Mm-hmm. But he was not an executive president. He was a figure of state and unity for symbolism. But the prime minister would be the executive prime minister. So that is a parliamentary hybrid. Now, whether, if there's a prime ministerial position proposed, it is a presidential hybrid or a parliamentary hybrid, we will see about that. Secondly, the question of whether we require referendum will fall squarely on what the team proposes as the role of parliament in all this. The role of parliament in appointment of the prime minister, in removal of prime minister, and those others. Because the constitution restricts certain actions that can only be done by referendum. And if you look at Article 255, and there are many, the only one that is most relevant for that is Article 255H, the functions of Parliament. Yeah. Currently, those functions are defined in Article 94. Mm-hmm. If you define any of those functions in such a way that it includes, for example, the question of appointment of a prime minister, the question of removal of a prime minister, then you would require referendum. If you define them in a way that it falls within the routine business of Parliament, then it would not require referendum.
That's true.
That is what I would say on that. Secondly, in terms of the 9-point agenda, the other one that would be relevant is what they say on devolution. Now, the structure and devolution is also protected. So, if at all they make any radical proposals in terms of the structure of devolution and the function of devolution,
possibility of increasing the amount that goes to the counties,
the amount would not go to the structure. The amount can be amended without, because it doesn't go to the structure. Right now, the amount is 15%. That's true. So it can go to 30, 35.
Yeah. Exactly.
What would require referendum is if the structure is proposed to be changed. Now, that we'll have to see. Thirdly, in terms of elections, there have been a lot of proposals in terms of the kind of elections we have, what we have, the first past the post. You know, and there have been proposals to have proportional representation and all those. Now, if they were to go that way of changing what we have from first past the post to proportional representation and a host of other things that go with that, then that might come to affect the entire structure, which would require referendum. So it's a question, it's a function of exactly the way they proposed it. So it is possible to have amendments that introduces the position of Prime Minister without a referendum, depending on the limit of what they have proposed.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for bringing that to light.
Can I add something to just that briefly?
And even as you do that, I want you to talk about the proposal to have cabinet ministers who will be a mix of technocrats and politicians as well. Briefly, how will that improve service delivery to Kenyans?
No, what part of the, I was just responding to what Atiende said. As it is, the plan, the document as it is at the moment, it looks like it's being couched to ensure that we avoid referendum. Yeah? And
that's the feeling.
Yes, exactly, from this document itself. However, what I agree with the Honorable Atiende Omolo is that this question will not end at the proposers thinking that we can just wake up and say these things does not require referendum. After all that is even done, citizens of the Republic will still insist that from what proposals have been put forward, I will not be surprised to see the Umtatas and others, citizens who are litigating in the public, going to court and saying, make an interpretation as to whether or not this document require the referendum, the decision of the people. So that, again, are dynamics about amending our constitution that we could face going forward. That's why it's very critical to have a more balanced approach to the document. The question of ministers coming from parliament and the leader of opposition going to parliament, leader of opposition for me, for example, is a perfect position for me. It takes just away the leader of minority in the House or the leader of majority, depending on whether the leader of opposition is in the minority or majority, and brings that leader who has a popular view to come to the House, and then provide that opportunity for proper checks and balances against the executive. And that was a proposal given by the president, by the deputy president when he was in Chatham House in London, that one of the things that we are missing is to have the leader of opposition sitting in parliament. I totally agree with that. Number two is to have these ministers. The only reason why you want to have ministers in the House is that many people feel like you want that person to be a cabinet secretary that has the votes of the people. But we will have some roadblocks to this discussion going forward. Number one is that what happens to separation of powers? Already Parliament has already been intimidated as it is by executive. What more will we have if we have 10 people? Because they are saying only 22 will remain ministers. We are not increasing the number of cabinet secretaries or cabinet ministers. You will have only 22, assuming half of them, 11, are from outside and half are from Parliament. Imagine a House of 400 members of Parliament and privileged 10. Is sitting in somewhere in the corner. It leaves an inequality of, say, the constituencies that Otiendo Molo represents and is a minister, and the one I represent and is not a minister is disadvantaged because the equality of constituencies is not being achieved. Number two is that it might undermine that separation of powers doctrine that is already in another section of the Constitution, that there is a separation of powers between the executive and the legislature. So that's a discussion we should move forward and maybe accommodate the views they are saying that outside the cabinet secretaries once nominated will have the power to be an ex-officio member of parliament without any decision being made, but only for purpose of coming to answer questions in the House.
So that a by-election would happen in that.
And that's why I'm happy that we are being told that this is a conversation we should be able to carry on going forward. So that is an area we must be able to take care of. And if you allow me later, there's also something I want to say about devolution.
Okay. And I want to also pick your mind on the war on corruption, which has been captured in some of the
especially devolution and the place of the Senate. I'd like to say something about it. Yeah.
Honorable Molo, your thoughts, cabinet ministers that are mixed of technocrats and politicians?
On the question of leader of majority and leader of opposition and the question of the cabinet. First of all, and this is why I think we should wait and have a proper discussion once we have the document. The representation, even as made by you there, leaves a lot of questions, okay? First of all, it makes it sound as if it's taken for granted that whichever party the president stands on and wins, yes, is the party that will also be the majority in parliament.
It's assumed.
It's not necessarily so. And when we then look at the report, we'll be able to examine whether that is actually what it says and what that imports. It is possible to have a president who is popular and either is an independent candidate or comes from a party that does not win the majority in parliament. And that was the situation in 2007.
That's true.
In which case, the president's party or whoever leads it will be the leader of opposition rather than the majority leader. Okay? And that introduces a host of other different things. That introduces and therefore diminishes the other statement that I think you made there, that the president can sack the prime minister, even in that formulation, because if the prime minister is not from the president's party, there is no way the president can have that authority to sack the leader of the opposite party who has the majority in parliament. So we need to read the report and internalize and examine it and discuss. Secondly, the idea of having a mixed cabinet. Right now, we have cabinet from outside of parliament. The reason we have that is because we went for a presidential system.
Correct.
By definition, in that presidential system, cabinet cannot be in parliament. Now, recently, even our own colleagues, the chair of the Committee on Implementation of the Constitution, introduced or sought to introduce an amendment to make cabinet members to be appointed from the House. And I indicated I will oppose it. Not because the idea is bad, But you cannot bring an idea like that and try and superimpose it on a presidential system.
Correct.
It's a contradiction. But if you have a parliamentary system or a presidential system which is parliamentary leaning, then you can have that. So, secondly, it is not entirely new. I will actually have you know that the harmonized draft constitution actually made this proposal to have a mixed cabinet, half from inside parliament, half from outside. And the thinking was this.
Along the way.
It is important, and I can confirm, that for accountability and effectiveness, you need cabinet secretaries who are also members of parliament, who can be held to account on a day-to-day basis. But it is conceivable that sometimes you might want expertise that is not within parliament. You might want some radical changes. You remember several years ago we had what was called the dream team. You might want somebody who can transform and guide a particular sector, and you can't find them in parliament. So the compromise, and it's a uniquely Kenyan compromise, just like the compromise of a directly elected president, is to have half the members outside and half the members inside. And I would have no problem in principle with that.
Okay.
Yes.
Honorable Murkomen, I want to give you a minute or so to get into devolution, because you said you want to address that and the role of Senate.
Yeah, the first, this document fails completely to appreciate that the role and the place of the Senate if you are going to bring members of National Assembly to the cabinet. Yeah, it mentions nothing completely about, despite the fact that the chair was a senator. And yet we have serious issues about Article 110 of the Constitution presently, as it is, insofar as the movement of bills between the both houses. We had proposed in a report that which I chaired in last Parliament, that we move all constitutional office holders to be approved by the Senate, and judges and all those officers. Now, if you bring members of Parliament or National Assembly to the cabinet, we need to first of all have a proper. If you are expecting the Senate to be part and parcel of this discussion going forward, you have to address that issue. Number two, we were told that the system, the real principal reason to form BBI and handshake was to ensure that you have positions that brings Kenyans and more inclusive and so forth. If you look at all that document as it is, and I scanning through it, you don't find anything that makes the loser in the elections to feel comfortable that now I've lost the elections, I will not cause havoc like it does before.
The post of Prime Minister, the post of the leader of the official opposition.
Let me read this for you, because this is the authentic document. It says, establish the position of Prime Minister in the same model as used by Tanzania. He shall be appointed by the President from the party or coalition of parties that are majority in the National Assembly, and if no party has majority, the person who appears to have the support of majority of the members of National Assembly, he must be confirmed by the National Assembly. He may be fired by either the President through a decree or by National Assembly through a vote of no confidence. In other words, that is just, sort of a glorified, minister, already existing ministries, and
super minister
of some sort. And if you look at it, you look at all the proposals being put here, that person is an appointee of the President and can be fired by the President anytime. In fact, it goes ahead to say, if he is appointed for the first time, he's not approved, he can drop that one, appoint another one, and so forth. So that person, first of all, is not a position to achieve what we are talking about.
In 30 seconds, how would you tweak
the leader, Atiendo Mola has captured it very well. You don't start by saying, let's create a position of Prime Minister and, put it there. You must start by asking yourself, do we go presidential system, or do we go a parliamentary system, or do we go for a presidential system with a parliamentary process, which includes like the South African had, or like we used to have before? If you don't discuss the structure itself, and then you bring such a position, say, okay, this person is a Prime Minister, will be appointed and fired anytime. So in the first place, it doesn't address the problem we were saying, that some people need to be comfortable, opposition need to exist that makes people comfortable. The leader of opposition existed in 2007. And remember, 2007, still people fought because the number two at that point in time did not accept the results. So the question that really I would like to listen to tomorrow, outside the things I've read and so forth, the thing I want to hear tomorrow is how has the Building Bridges Initiative addressed the problem of the loser in a presidential election refusing to concede defeat?
Okay.
Number two, you talk about devolution and say, you're going to move health workers, for example, to form National Health Commission.
Yes,
but you've not moved the health function like you've moved the teachers' function to the national level. And will Kenyans accept, after working so hard through devolution to improve the health facility and health function, will they accept a movement of the health function to the national level?
I can tell you have many questions.
That will be very
Hopefully, the ones you don't capture tonight, you'll capture tomorrow at the Bomas of Kenya.
Thank you.
Okay, this is why it is dangerous to discuss a report that you have not seen.
Although we have
not seen.
What we have shown you.
I have told you, for me, I treat it as speculation and hypothesis.
Okay.
So when my brother Murkomen says the report does not address the report, there's absolutely no yardstick against which to say he is lying or he's saying the truth. That is unfortunate.
I'm tempted to ask him to share with you what he has on his phone.
Even by his own admission, what he has is not complete. So it would not be a good yardstick to test it. So for me, I will not go into the idea of what it has addressed and what it has not addressed. Secondly, it's a bit confusing because Senator Murkomen is sounding happily forceful, which is a good thing, on areas that, in his view, should be covered and all, including powers of Senate. And some of these, if they were to be captured, and I don't know whether they are captured, then they would come into affecting what we call, for example, functions of parliament. Design of devolution.
Most likely.
And inevitably, we'll be speaking of a referendum. To the best of my knowledge, I always had the greatest opponents to the idea of a referendum to be those of Senator Murkonen's persuasion in the Tanga team that there is no way we'll have a referendum. So when he speaks this way, I am actually confused whether his lamentation is we can't have a document that will not take us to a referendum, but we will come to that when we read it. Let me come to the small issue of if we were to have that design of government. And of course, we all agree that, as the principal said, it would be out there for comment. It would sound quite close in some respect, not in all, in some respect to what we had as the coalition government, okay? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, we will discuss it. But what I know is that, one, from where I stand and in my analysis, that is around the time when we had relative stability in this country. Relative political stability, not just a ceasefire as we have now. That is around the time when we had some sort of inclusivity in government, including in appointments.
Matched with a wage bill that many were concerned about.
The wage bill has actually risen since that time. If you look at the analysis, you will be surprised that the wage bill has risen post the coalition government, and that is the truth. That is the time when we had some sort of control on corruption, relative control on corruption. It had not bludgeoned and ballooned the way it has. In fact, even the public debt was relatively controlled. So if you look at some of the 9 points, just at a glance, you kind of find that a lot of them were a little more constrained at that time than subsequently. And so if the balance was simply between the design of government of that time and the presidential subsequently, it is clear that the presidential system that we've experienced subsequently has taken us to a must-watch position than that. Is it necessarily the best? I don't know. Personally, I am more inclined usually to a parliamentary system.
Okay.
And I would be more inclined to anything, even if it's a hybrid, but a hybrid that tends towards a parliamentary system.
Okay. I'll take that as your final comment. Honorable Otiende Amolo, thank you for joining us today on the program. Marietta, Member of Parliament, together with Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen, the Senate Majority Leader, and Elgeyo Marakwet. Senator, thank you for joining me for this program. Of course, expect more discussions tomorrow when hopefully both of you will have gotten a report that you can agree is the correct one. Because we seem to have a bit of a challenge with that right now. A very sober discussion. But we take a break now. Here is what's coming up.